terms and conditions are the boring bits, right? Like, I don't want to deal with terms and conditions. What's going on here? Like, it's complicated, right? So it's really funny. The first thing that we regularly see with clients is they come to us, and the first thing I ask for is, hey, have you got terms and conditions? Can you send them to me?
What are
And
those?
a whole heap of them are packed. A whole heap of them are sort of cut and paste from other people's bits here and there, and
And
then
they
they do
don't
other
even know
bits.
why they've said
Yeah.
particular things. Like there's Security of Payments Act all over there, adjudication, they don't even know what that is. And then when you're asking them, all right, which method are we going? They're like, what? And then you dig a little deeper and you say, right, well, why is this on here? And they're like, I
So,
don't know, I got it from
so
someone
what
else.
what do you think are the important bits that should be included in a set of T's and C's?
Payment terms. First start. What are your terms of business? Because the other side has to comply, agree, and if they've complied and agreed, then you can legitimately enforce that. So that's, one of the most important things. Then it would be helpful to have some type of security within the T's and C's because that gives you an
But
added.
that's hard for some businesses, isn't it, right? Like if you're in a professional services business like your own and my own, sometimes that's not possible.
No.
But there are other bits and pieces we can use, aren't there? Like jurisdiction clauses.
Jurisdiction,
There,
dispute resolution, those are always in the first instance, what you look at. Like if a client's coming to me as a litigator, I'll look at the T's and C's and go, all right, what are the payment terms? What jurisdiction am I in? Are there dispute resolution clauses that I need to be aware of? Is there something sideways here that I need to think about? Um, that's pretty much it if we're thinking, simple.
well, and I love cost recovery clauses, but my
Yeah.
understanding is that courts don't necessarily respect cost recovery clauses anymore.
No, they don't, particularly Queensland. So they're just striking those out. I mean, we've had default judgment after default judgment being amended, or we've been given instructions to submit because they just don't like them.
So, can you help give me a better understanding of how cost recovery clauses technically work and why the courts are ruling against them at the minute?
Well, in other jurisdictions, it seems they are more readily acceptable. So we generally file out of those jurisdictions if we have to. Um, I don't, there have been a couple of cases and some decisions where the courts just don't see them to be properly incurred, I guess. Or it's because it's not incurred at the time. So it's charged, and again, this depends on each individual entity and how they run the cost recovery piece. Now, if it's charged afterwards upon successful collection, then that's not really incurred at the time. So it's somewhat of a speculative fee, and at the time when you're filing that judgment, it hasn't been properly incurred. So that's why the courts are taking a firmer view to it, because at that point in time, it's actually not on any invoice and it hasn't been charged. So, I mean, if we look at the T's and C's and work with the collection agency, then perhaps that's something that we can do moving forward.
So that's a really great point, right? So part of the thing that we do is try and help anticipate what the cost will be up front when we're talking to clients and going, hey, this is what this is likely to look like. Here is where the lawyer is likely to present that if it has to go down that litigation path. And not a lot of the stuff that we do goes down that litigation path, but when it does, it's normally a little bit messy. And so we're trying to cover that off and anticipate that. So if I'm the client, so if I'm the creditor, how would you recommend somebody approach something like establishing what those costs are to more likely get them accepted by a court?
Always clear from the start. I know because I've worked in this industry for a long time, particularly in that small debt recovery space. And a lot of the collectors sell it as, oh, you don't pay anything right now, and then it's only at the end. So, of course, if you then try and amend that later, the client's head blows up and you're going, oh, no, I'm just trying to get the costs across the line so that the courts see them as being properly incurred, and you're trying to explain these really complex legislative instruments to them, and yet they've been told something at the start that's entirely different. Of course, you need to understand that it's the management of that relationship. So maybe don't say that stuff at the beginning if you're running it in a jurisdiction where, and I mean, this is also hard for collectors to be across as well. You know, there's a lot of states in the country, it's difficult. They're also not solicitors and they haven't been doing this stuff day in and day out, particularly if they're just starting out and new. So it only takes a couple of times for you to get your head blown off by a client going, this is not what was said, until you learn, and then you handle the relationship a bit better.
When it comes to T&C creation, don't use something that you've cut and pasted from the web. Do something that's tailored for your business. And there are lots of things you should think about. One, you should be thinking about jurisdiction clauses. You should be thinking about terms of payment at an absolute minimum inside those things for the specific services you provide. The other thing that you need to take into consideration is if that you have a cost recovery clause inside those terms and conditions, you should ensure that you understand what those costs are in advance, because sometimes the courts can be less amenable to rewarding you for those costs.